So last week, our team went down to the Dominican Republic and we went to the town of Santiago, which is one of the biggest towns in the Dominican Republic. We worked with a church to put on a VBS for 150 kids every single day. And some of these kids go to the Daryl's Music Maker program that we provide in that church to keep these at-risk kids off the streets when they're not allowed to go to school and while their parents are at work. I wanted to go on this trip because I work very closely with Daryl's Music Makers, and I've worked with them for the past year, but to see the faces of these kids, it just puts a new fire under you for the work that you do. And my husband has a heart for missions, so it just seemed like a really good team effort to go down together as our first mission trip together. I know, it was really sweet. And I love Terry Cox. I forgot. I went because I love Terry Cox and Brad Harden. There was a spiritual battle taking place before we even left the United States. Probably the 2 weeks leading up to it. There was a lot of tension that you could feel, where it was almost like Satan was just trying to keep you from doing some good works. Oh gosh, it's so awful. Oh.
It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just an interview.
No, I'm just crying because the day of, I almost didn't go because I had made a mistake with one of my kids. And I thought, if I can't take care of my kids, then the person I'm leaving them with can't take care of them. So I almost didn't even get on in the van. And it was an attack. It was an absolute spiritual attack. And we definitely overcame it. And once we got down there, we faced some things that we weren't prepared for. And, Satan always tries to get you when you're doing God's work, when you're trying to make God's name more famous. But thankfully, we have prayer warriors all around us, and we were able to make it through and have a great impact on these kids. Yeah. So we were able to stay in a hotel. It was, my understanding, it was a very nice hotel for the city. So it was authentic. It was, I don't know how to explain it. It was different. It was authentic. It was...
I did see that y'all posted pictures on Facebook every night, which was, when you get started, that was really good for the rest of us to see what you guys were doing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was
Every day we took pictures and we wanted to share a little bit of the kids and what we were doing, but we were able to stay at a hotel. Every evening we went over to Barry and Sonia Burnett's home and they fed us dinner. And we got a time of worship. We sat outside with Terry Arrington, and he played the guitar, and we just sang loud, so the rest of what we would consider a subdivision could hear us, and people sat outside and listened. And that was a very cool downtime where we could process and debrief about the day, and then get our game plan for the next day. So thank you, Burnett's. And they fed us mostly American food, so it was good.
So what did y'all do during the day?
Every day we went to the church. It's First Baptist Church of Santiago. And when we got there, every day we had more and more children meet us at the gate. Where the last day we were there, we pulled up and we couldn't even get off our bus because there were so many children. As soon as our doors opened, they were piling in our bus. There were hundreds of children meeting us at the gate every day. But once we got inside, we set up for VBS. We did a VBS the entire week. And we capped our children at 150 because that was what we could handle and give us the chance to actually teach them about Jesus and about God. So we had a craft time, we had a Bible story time, and we had a game time. And we rotated around an hour apiece, and we broke them into age groups. And we taught about parables. So we did the parable of the lost son. We did, what are some more I can't remember. We did 4 parables. Okay.
The seeds on the side of the road.
I can't remember which one. So we taught about all the parables, and then we took words like faithfulness and grace and compassion and taught about those key words, and integrated them into our craft time and our Bible story and our games.
What are those words in, what do they speak down there, French?
Spanish. Mm-hmm. Mercia, compasión. Maybe not Mercia. I think it's Gracie. Gracie. I know compasión. We had translators, so that was really good.
Okay, good.
We have translators. I can say, siéntate, sit down, and escuche mía, listen to me. And those are about the only phrases we really yelled the whole time. Compasión! It was good.
Let's see here. Was there, what was the hardest thing about this trip?
There's a couple hard things about this trip. The very first day that we were doing the VBS, so Monday, was very hard. They opened the gates and we had 226 children come to the VBS. That morning when we got there Monday morning, we walked around the barrio that houses these children, and these are the poor of the poor. Homes stacked upon homes, no running water, chickens running in the street. There's a place called The Hole where it's just tiny rooms that people live in. And we walked along those streets on Monday morning and we told all the parents about VBS that we were going to do. And by that afternoon, when we opened the gates, 226 kids flooded us. And it was chaos. It was crazy. Nobody was prepared for what we were about to experience, including our hosts down there. They thought maybe 90 kids the first day. So the very first day was hard. It was really hard because we thought we failed. We felt like a failure. But then we put a cap on 150 kids the rest of the time we were there, and we were able to form relationships. So the next hardest thing was when we had to say goodbye. Because the kids wouldn't even get off the bus. So that one was hard. We had kids standing at gates begging for water. There were a lot of hard things. And we know that God is good, and we will continue to go back and visit these children, and we just hope that we have planted a seed in them that grows where they can change the direction that their parents have already established for them and where they live. So, yeah.
How was this experience different from an American VBS?
Oh, it was totally different. How is it different?
That's a Spencer question.
Okay, so the very number one hurdle is we didn't speak Spanish. And so the biggest thing was you had to wait for a translator to be able to communicate well with these children. And I was on games, so we had to give instructions on how this game was going to go. So the very number one hurdle was a communication barrier. Our translators were wonderful, but it's always easier when you can just speak what you need to speak and you can just communicate with these kids. Other than that, the VBS, even just our facilities were different to host a VBS. And really just the children that we serviced, that we got to spend time with, they're not disciplined. They don't have direction. They don't take direction well. Most of their parents go away for work, and these children just spend time with other children all day long running the streets, and they fight. And that's how they survive, is through fighting. So their mode of survival came across at VBS, where when it was time to get water, they didn't even think, well, there's enough water to go through. There's enough water for all of us. So they would just come to you and swarm you, and they want water now. They'll hit somebody else to get the water. So there was trying to keep 150 children working together and to keep the fighting down. Unfortunately, we had to remove some kids from the VBS. So just the whole atmosphere was different because of the children that we were spending time with, and lifestyle and culture.
What was the most meaningful part of the trip?
There was, and I've made a post about this, I was on games for the most part, so we really just got to play and interact with kids. But one day we sat down and the word was grace, and we got a chance to just visit with the girls that were, this age group was 7 to 10-year-old little girls. And we sat down and we started talking about grace, and I asked the question, what happens when you mess up? What does God do when you mess up? And the answer was, God punishes me. And I just can't imagine living thinking that every time I messed up, God would punish me, because these poor girls, 80% of them, statistically, by the age of 12, will end up in prostitution. And they don't know that that God can forgive you for these mistakes that you make and just wants to have you back. So being able to share with a group of young women that they are worthy and that God extends grace to them, that they are important, that they are special, that their dreams matter. These little girls just looked like, what are you talking about? It was so foreign to them that they were able to be more and that God would still love them. And we discussed, well, even I mess up. And they said, no, you're a missionary. You don't mess up. And so it was very good to be able to use some of my stories with them, saying, oh no, even I mess up every single day and I have grace abundant. And it was very impactful to see their faces. And then you ask them, well, what do you want to be when you get older? And they get excited. They're excited now because, maybe there is some hope. So that was special.
What did you do every day on your own to recharge yourself, to prepare yourself for the day?
At the end of the day, after we did VBS, we would go back to our hotel, but then we would meet over at Barry and Sonia's for dinner, and our whole team would come together, and the interns who were down there, which were some of our translators, would come together, and Terry Arrington was there. And for me personally, worship, musically worshiping is always, it always re-energizes me. So we were able to do worship every single night after dinner, and have a time of prayer, like popcorn prayer, where I pray and then you pray, and we all just get to pray out loud and as a group and come before God humbly and discuss our day and pray for the next day and the children. And that was very re-energizing. And then we'd go sit down with our teams and make a plan for the next day once we had been focused and humbled, and let God prepare our hearts to go over the next day.
So did this trip change anything about your own connection with God?
It did. This trip gave me more trust in God. Oh gosh, Carmen. I'm such a baby. Before I left, 2 weeks before I left, John Atchison preached a sermon about how fear is crippling. And I know that I'm a scaredy cat, and I'm afraid of things like diseases, and people call me a hypochondriac. And but I was leaving my kids, and I was afraid to leave my kids. And God took really good care. God reminded me before I left, a few days before I left, that you're not leaving your kids with someone, you're leaving your kids with me. And he came through. And my mom came through. She was wonderful. But God just really came through for me, where my children were happy the whole time I was gone. And I just have a new trust for God. Yes. So I am closer to God in my faith. Not just for money and just for provision, but for my children. And that's a huge thing to let go of, I think. No, it made me so happy. Every time I called them, we FaceTime them like twice a day, and they were happy, and it made my day easier. Like, I didn't have to worry that, oh my gosh, they're miserable. No, it didn't make me, it made my life so much easier. Maddie was saying, I can't believe that that it's already time for you to come home. It didn't seem like that long. So you can, as a parent, you cannot even ask for more than that when you leave the country and you have toddlers. Yeah.
Okay. Here is my favorite question is, what was the most surprising thing about this trip?
The most surprising thing to me was how much of an impact that DMM really has on the 80 kids who go to that school program that we provide for. So Daryl's Music Makers, we have 80 students enrolled there, and they go for the first 4 hours of the day before they're allowed to go to public school because they're considered at-risk learners. So they either have a hard time learning, they cause trouble. So they are not allowed into school until noon. And then I was told that half the time the teachers at the public school don't want to deal with those children, so the teachers don't even show up. So these kids are not getting much of an education at all. When we had our 150 kids there, you could tell which kids were DMM kids. They could speak some English. They had discipline and morale. They knew Bible verses. They could play instruments. We got to sit and listen to them play instruments. But there was a distinct difference between the children who simply went to public school and the children who were involved in Daryl's Music Makers program. Again, I have been with DMM for a year. I work with them very closely. I had no idea the true impact that we're making on these kids down there. And anyway, Carmen, it was so cool. It was so cool to see these kids. So that was the most surprising thing. Not like, oh, it's a surprise. Like, I didn't know DMM was great. We knew it was great, but to see the fruits coming out, like firsthand, see the fruits coming out of this nonprofit it was pretty cool. It was really cool. Okay, I need to tell people that children who are hurting sometimes act out. And it's not because they're bad. We have a lot of broken children here in the United States, as well as in foreign countries. But we have a lot of children just surrounding us every day that need you to pour into them and remind them that they have worth and that they are special and they are important, because a lot of our kids are just in a cycle and they don't know that they can be any different than what they've always seen. So after this trip, it's just so reconfirmed in my mind that people in general are broken, and that it is our responsibility and our duty as Christians to love them and to make effort and never pass judgment when we don't know what's going on. Yeah, that's it. Take care of those babies because they're naughty probably for a reason.
Why should someone else go on a mission trip? Why should I go?
You should go on a mission trip. You get as much out of it as you put in it, which is true. So we know that those children received a seed of something. Something was planted in them. They loved us. Every single moment that we were there, they loved us. They looked for us. They just could not wait till we got there. So we know that we had an impact on them. But those children in turn just turned our world upside down. Like, if we could bring them all home, God knows we would. So when you go there thinking that you are there to make a difference, just don't be shocked when you come back a totally different person. But mission trips abroad, mission trips home here at the States are so important because you just get perspective and you get poured into and you change and you are out of your comfort zone. My comfort zone is Renew Community Church. And I got right out of that. And so, different perspective, different people, and those kids will just change your world.
Will you go back?
Oh, I'll be back next year, absolutely. If I'm not back before the trip. Really, the Dominican has stolen the Hardin's heart, and that is probably a place that we will continue to visit with the foreign missions team each year, if not more often than once a year. It's so hard to explain how these children lived and their faces, and so I would encourage you that if you are able to get involved with the missions team so that you can have the heart for the things that we do here, and you can have a firsthand experience with them. Even if it's just getting involved with the children here at this church, we need to get involved with our kids. because we can make such a difference. And they are just looking for somebody like you to take care of them. So I would just say pour into your babies, pour into our babies, and consider doing missions to take care of other babies.